Hello, my dear children. Today in English, we are going to learn a new poem, Six Honest Serving Men. This poem is written by Rudyard Kipling. Six Honest Serving Men. I kept six honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. I send them over land and sea. I send them east and west. But after they have worked for me, I give them all a rest. I let them rest from 9 till 5, for I am busy then, as well as breakfast, lunch and tea, for they are hungry men. But different folk have different views. I know a person small. She keeps 10 million serving men who get no rest at all. She sends them abroad on her own affairs. From the second she opens her eyes, 1 million hows, 2 million wares, and 7 million whys. So let's read the first stanza. I keep six honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. Here the poet wants to tell us that he keeps six honest serving men. Honest means a person who says the truth, who is very loyal and obedient. So the poet keeps six honest serving men, and the names of these six honest serving men are what, why, when, how, where, and who. So here these six honest serving men are not actually men, but they indicate the questions that we get in our daily life, like what, when, where, how, who. These are some of the questions that we get in our everyday life. So these questions indicate the six honest serving men. And the poet is telling us that they taught him all that he knew. Everything that he has learned from his childhood is because of this six honest serving men. So the poet wants to tell us that from the time he was a kid, he used to ask these questions what, how, when, and seek answers for these questions. So because of this, he got a whole lot of information. So in the first stanza, the poet is trying to tell us about the curiosity of a child, how a child is curious, and all the time how a child asks questions. So in order to gain knowledge, children, you have to ask certain questions. I send them over land and sea. I send them east and west. But after they have worked for me, I give them all a rest. In this stanza, the poet says that he sends these questions from east to west and from over land to seas, which means that he asks questions about different places from east to west and over land and sea. This tells us that the poet asks questions from different places. And after these questions have worked for him, he gives them all a rest. So this tells us that the poet is not always every time asking a question. He asks questions sometimes, and sometimes he gives them rest. I let them rest from 9 till 5, for I am busy then, as well as breakfast, lunch and tea, for they are hungry men. So in this stanza, the poet tells us that he lets these questions rest. So from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock, he doesn't ask many questions because at this time the poet is busy. So 9 to 5, this time is usually work time. This time the poet works in an office. So that is why he doesn't ask questions at this time. And the poet also gives breakfast, lunch, tea for all these hungry men. So these questions like what, when, how, who, these all questions are always hungry. They need an answer. So these questions need an answer. For that, poet asks questions sometimes, and the other times, like the times from 9 to 5 o'clock, he gives these questions rest. But different folk have different views. I know a person small. She keeps 10 million serving men who get no rest at all. In this stanza, the poet is trying to tell us that different folk have different views. That is, folk means people. So different people have different views. And poet knows a person who is very small. So poet knows a child, a little girl child, and this child keeps 10 million serving men. So poet has only 6 serving men, but this girl has 10 million serving men, and she doesn't give rest to all these serving men. Now children, million means 1 million is equal to 10 lakh. So this girl keeps 10 million serving men. That means she keeps 1 crore serving men. So you can imagine how many questions she has. The girl is very curious. She asks a lot of questions. In this stanza, the poet is trying to tell us that little children, small children, have a lot of questions. They ask a lot of questions, and that is how they gain knowledge. So as we grow older and older, the amount of questions that we ask reduces. But when we are a child, you must have seen, no, how small children ask a lot of questions. So this tiny little girl has 10 million serving men, and these men, like these questions, do not get a rest at all. She continuously keeps on asking questions. And these all the serving men, 10 million serving men, are always working for this little girl. She sends him abroad on her own affairs. From the second she opens her eyes, 1 million house, 2 million wares, and 7 million wise. So, in this stanza, the poet is trying to tell us that the little girl sends these questions abroad for her own affairs. She asks a lot of questions, not only from one place, but from different places. She is very curious. And from the second she opens her eyes, so from the time the girl wakes up, she has a lot of questions. She has 1 million house, 2 million wares, and 7 million whys. So the girl, the child, is very curious. From this poem, the poet is trying to appreciate the curiosity of a child, the innocence of a child, how a child's mind is always curious and always asking questions. So, it is curiosity that helps us to gain knowledge. So, never be afraid to ask questions and seeking knowledge. Children, I hope that you have enjoyed this poem. See you next time. Bye.